This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. With your host, Tyson Gifford and William Rowick. Episode 135, recorded November 25th, 2017. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. I am your host, the editor-in-chief of TV Enthusiast. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at TVE, William Rowick.
Hello.
So, today we are going to be talking about Mr. Robot and Stranger Things, no surprise. We're going to be talking about only one episode of Stranger Things this week. We normally talk about two. We're going to be talking about the kind of one-off, most hated or divisive episode of the season. And then we're going to be talking about the most recent episode of Mr. Robot, all leading into next week where we're going to cover the rest of Stranger Things Season 2, the last two episodes, and continue Mr. Robot for like another 3 weeks, I believe. So let's start things off with Stranger Things Season 2, Chapter 7, The Lost Sister. So, Will, what did you think of this little one-off episode?
Yep, not a fan. Nope. I went into it with an open mind because I know popular opinion was against this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to go into it with an open mind. I know it deals with the characters that were introduced in the first episode at the beginning of the season,
mm-hmm.
which is like, okay, but now that we've got to meet these characters, I'm left wondering why. Why do they exist? Why? This has nothing to do with the plot of like the season. It's so disconnected. Like I get that they're trying to create this backstory for Eleven and to explore her backstory and try to give her like a more personal journey this season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's cool, but why? and it's like the only thing I can think of that could possibly justify like introducing these characters is if like this is a thread that's being left for season 3.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of the Thor Ragnarok scene in Age of Ultron.
Right.
Like where it was like, this is just, what the fuck is this? This is just...
Exactly. It's like, what the hell's going on?
So this is completely out of the story that we're watching right now, and it's like a little setup's fine and all, but this is like you got too distracted by your setup and it interfered.
Right,
in one way, I'm kind of glad though, because it's if they're going to do that, it's nice that it's like one episode. So like if you're doing another watcher, you can pretty much just skip it.
That's true.
And like not miss anything.
Right, exactly. Because you don't miss anything skipping this episode. That's another problem with the episode. Yeah. And self-contained episodes are fine in shows, typical shows that run 23 episodes a season. This only runs like what, 13?
This one's 9.
Oh yeah, that's right. This one runs like 9 episodes, and it's so tightly serialized. You know, like each episode builds off another. To have an episode that's completely disconnected just feels wrong.
Well, that was also one of the biggest strengths of the first season of Stranger Things was that it felt like this long movie that like was from the 80s but somehow lost.
Right.
That we rediscovered, you know?
And you could see that again, like they position it as a movie. They call this Stranger Things 2.
Yeah, like it's a sequel.
Yeah, like it's a sequel. Except, during a 2-hour film, you typically don't stop the plot for something completely unrelated.
Yeah, that's why I compared it to that Age of Ultron stuff with Thor.
Yeah.
That was like heavily criticized because it was like, okay, we get you want to set stuff up, but this just like completely ruined the pacing of the movie.
Right, exactly.
Like, worry about the plot that you actually have in front of you,
Exactly, for real.
But, so that's kind of, I think, probably the biggest complaints about the episode. It isn't even so much like the quality of the episode itself, but that. As a whole, though, on the episode, like if you were just to kind of look at the episode outside of the context of part of the season, what do you think of it?
I think it's an okay episode. It was fine, I guess. again, a problem I have is like I didn't really care about the characters that were introduced too much. And it's not a fault of the acting, not at all. Again, the actors, especially the actress who played the young woman there,
Callie?
Callie, who came from the same place as 11, she did an excellent job. It's just that the character itself didn't come across as fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Like,
I think if they had been able to like incorporate this group into the actual story of this season,
right?
Like maybe it would be a little bit more interesting and stuff. But it just feels so out of place with the rest of the show.
It does. It feels completely out of place. Like I don't know what.
Thankfully, this season is one episode longer than the last season, so even if you cut this out, it's still like the same length of a season.
So,
so at least there's that.
If this episode was like the first episode of Stranger Things ever, and this probably isn't like that great of a thing, but like I probably wouldn't watch anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't that exciting. We're kind of jumping into their story in the middle, and like we don't have the beginning or the end of it, and then we're like leaving a story that like had ended previously on like a big note. Like there's some big stuff happening, and then it's like, oh, cut away. Let's look at this journey for an episode.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thankfully, Stranger Things is also drop salt once. Like this would really piss people off if they had to wait a week from this to the next. After the cliffhanger from the week before, they had like, okay, they got that cliffhanger. Finally, the next episode's on. What the hell? People would not be happy. But thankfully, I mean, at least you can go right into the next episodes. But yeah, this was not a great episode of the season. Let's kind of run over kind of real quick what's happening. I mean, it begins, we have 11 is tracks down and locates Callie, who's the girl that she saw in her mom's visions. We talked about those last week, about her mom having that kind of vision, which all those words that she'd been uttering all the time was just like these key words from her like collection of visions.
Right. So she's basically she's following the visions 11 because 11 saw a young girl with her at the institute, that and 11 apparently 11 didn't have memories of this girl beforehand.
Maybe because she was too young, or who knows what other.
Yeah, who knows? It's actually not explained why she doesn't like remember this girl. But again, it's the kind of thing where it's easy to explain, and so you can suspend your disbelief there. But now that 11's reminded of this, has this image, she wants to go and find her, which is like, that's a natural impulse. Sure.
So that leads her to Chicago, the location that we saw in the very first scene of the season.
Yes, because this is where this woman is. She's no longer a young girl. She's like a young woman now. So, that's where like this woman is now. It turns out like this girl 11 saw, which you could guess already beforehand, but it turns out it was the young woman with the gang that we saw at the beginning of the season.
And the 8 tattoo on her forearm.
Yeah.
So she has this gang of outcasts that are like 80s movie outcast cliches. You got the one tall guy with the mohawk, and you got the kind of heavy set black bruiser guy. You have like it's like all these like cliche outcast characters.
Yeah, pretty much.
Looks like something out of Strangers, or not. Looks like something out of Adventures in Babysitting, that they like a gang that they would run into or something.
Right.
So 11 ends up tracking down this gang. She's asking for Callie, trying to figure out where Callie is. They're kind of like, what the hell are you doing here, little girl, And Callie ends up coming down, recognizes her. They show each other's tattoos, and Callie kind of takes on like a mentoring role for 11 to kind of like show her more about her own powers. And in that same thing, we learn that what Callie's powers are is it's not the same as what 11 has. She doesn't like have telekinetic powers. She can like create illusions.
Right.
And so the scene from the first episode, she didn't like collapse that bridge that they escaped under. She just made the person driving the car see the bridge collapsing.
Right. So she
kind of like spun out of the way, and
yeah, which is a really cool ability too.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how useful it would be against the monsters and Stranger Things.
Probably not very useful at all, but
but like in the context of this separate outside episode, it works really well. So Callie immediately works 11 into her kind of plots and machinations, where she's been like tracking down and killing these members of the Department of Energy that were involved in this whole conspiracy that basically were fostering 11 and hers powers.
Basically, she wants to get 11 into the killer spirit. You know, she wants to kind of turn 11 into a killer like her.
Mm-hmm. But in doing so, she's also like being able to teach 11 how to more effectively use her powers.
Right.
Which is cool. So she's kind of she Yodas for 11 a little bit.
Basically, she takes on 11. She takes on 11 and mentors her because she sees how powerful 11 is and how helpful 11 could be with her cause, with what she's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to harness that power to further her own ends, which is to get revenge on the people from the Department of Energy.
And most importantly, she gives 11 a bitchin' makeover.
Yes. But it's very clear the whole time that, you know, they're not BFFs. Like, she is literally just using 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, when they showed the scene where like 11 got the makeover and stuff, and I could tell like 11 was happy, like she found a group, and all I can think of is it's so tragic because it's like, they 11, they don't care about you.
Yeah. It's like the cool kids like taking in the geek, you know, so that they can use him.
Exactly.
To do their homework or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like that.
So using 11's ability to track people, that we've seen a lot of in this season, with her finding her mother and now finding Callie, they use it to track a member of a lab technician, the one who did the shock therapy on her mom. And so they go, okay, this will be our next target. And so they track him down, they break into his apartment. They're kind of like holding him at gunpoint, basically. And, you know, they're basically getting ready to kill this guy and try to get some information from him. And kind of two things come out of this. One is that this lab tech says that Brenner is still alive. Last we saw Brenner was last season. We saw the Demogorgon basically standing over him, and our impression was basically that the Demogorgon had killed him.
Right.
This technician is claiming that he's still alive and that he could lead 11 and Callie to him. 11 kind of is a little thrown by this. Callie is kind of like sees it as a distraction and doesn't believe him and just wants 11 to kill him. Also just because if Brenner is alive, then 11 should be able to track him too, the same way she tracked down this guy.
11 balks at killing him when she learns that he has two daughters.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So this is like sparks a disagreement between 11 and Callie. They kind of come to a fragile peace, I guess you could say, after that, about what they, you know, need to do from that point out. But having gone after this guy has proven to be, the opposite of fortuitous for this gang.
Yeah.
Because it's brought in government agents being able to track them down now.
Right, exactly. Like, they messed up big time with that, you know.
They're able to kind of like slip away because of Callie's abilities.
Right, they're able to get away, but
this is where 11 parts ways with them.
This is where 11, because 11 has, you know, I wouldn't say it's like a vision what she has, but she
looks for Hopper in the same way she looked for them.
Yeah, she looks for Hopper, and then she sees Mike in some kind of, you know, Mike when he was running trying to warn the people of the Department of Energy about the trap. Mm-hmm. You know, she sees him in some kind of distress. So she knows shit's going down. And so she actually wants to go back and help Mike, you know.
Callie's against this. She tells 11, you know, they're not going to be able to give you what you need. And 11 says, I know, but I can give them what they need.
Right.
So there's an interesting point I heard made about this episode is that in in a way, this is like a story about Eleven being offered home 3 times on 3 separate occasions. So she was offered home earlier, like not in this episode, by Hopper. And then she was offered a home later in the last episode and early in this episode by her aunt.
Right.
And then she was offered a home a 3rd time by Callie. And through her own conviction, she realized that her home is back at Hawkins, not necessarily with Hopper, but just with her friends in Hawking.
Yeah, with her friends in Hawkins. Yeah,
which is a different dynamic because when she was in Hawkins before with Hopper, she was like hiding away from her friends. Her friends didn't know she was there, and so this is like the moment of the turning point on that. Like it's no longer that's the case. Like she is now coming back to her friends, which unfortunately has now taken 7 episodes into the 2nd season for her to reunite with her friends. Something we've been waiting for, but it's finally happening. So she sees they're in trouble. She is now on her way back to Hawkins. And that's the episode. So, like we said, not too great of an episode. Very kind of out of place. Really kind of ruins the flow of what had come right before and what's coming right after. Kind of got in the way of that. But, at the same time,
no, I mean, I get what they were trying to do. They're trying to, they're trying to expand on Eleven's backstory and give her a more personal journey this season. They're trying to explore. I commend that. Like, really, like, I was like conflicted because on the one hand, it's like, okay, like, I really hate the sidetracking. And then on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but like, I get what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I can't fault them for that.
Hopefully we get to see more numbered people later in a way that more directly ties into the overarching plot of a future season.
Right, exactly. It could have been more tied in with the plot, I thought.
Yeah, like it could have been. 11 was basically just sitting at Hopper's house for 6 episodes this season.
That's true.
Yeah. She could have broken ways with him a while ago. It would have felt in place for her to do so after Halloween when he broke his promise to her and she got all upset about that. That would have been a great point for her to break off, and then this story could have been intercut with the other episodes and tied in more with like the way the plot was. Instead, they kind of like held off and then did it as like this one-off episode. I don't know if that was for the best or not. I mean, on one hand, like we said, because it's such a one-off episode, it means that if you really don't like that part of the story, now next time you watch through the season, if you want to watch through again, you can just skip it and basically lose nothing.
Right.
But that's it. So next week we'll be talking about the last 2 episodes of the season. So it's kind of like it kind of feels like I've already seen it. So you have, I don't think you've seen it yet, have you?
No, I haven't watched it. I made a policy where I wasn't going to watch ahead of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So like I could easily have done it in the Temptations there, but I don't want to watch ahead of the podcast just so by the time we do the podcast and we're discussing, I'm not already sitting there thinking, I already know for next week. So yeah, no, it's so like by the time the podcast comes around, my impressions of the episodes will be more fresh.
That's good.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll be discussing next week. It kind of works like almost like a 2-part season finale. I mean, everything before this anyways kind of acted like a 6-part season beginning.
Right. Yeah.
So there's no like shock that it acts this way. I'm glad that we broke it up this way though, because we'd been doing 2 episodes at a time. And if we had done all 3 episodes for this podcast, this episode, it would have been weird to discuss because we'd have that general plot to talk about, but then this one-off episode as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't have flowed very well.
Yeah.
Besides, I don't really want to like spend if I'm going to discuss 3 episodes of something, that's going to be like the entire podcast. I think no room for anything else.
So next week we're going to go over basically the finale of Stranger Things 2. But to finish off this week's podcast, we're going to go now into Mr. Robot, episode 3.6, Frederick plus Tanya.chk. I think a much better episode than the Stranger Things episode to compare the two we're talking to.
Oh, yeah. Damn.
So this episode brought us back to...
although I have mixed feelings on this one, too.
We'll get into those, because this episode reintroduced us to Frederick and Tanya, or as I'll now forever be calling them, Elaine and George.
Yes.
It also brought back our good buddy, Mr. TV, Mr. Seinfeld fan, who Elliot was imprisoned with before. And we get a lot more kind of fun moments with him talking about TV shows, including Frasier and Knight Rider. And he's a huge fan of Knight Rider, not so much of Frasier. So this episode begins. Elliot is completely freaking out about the 71 buildings that were destroyed and all the thousands of people that were killed. He goes to his therapist and he's having trouble like kind of holding himself together basically. And he wants to tell her, but he like feels like he can't, and he's not sure what'll happen if he starts, if like Mr. Robot will take control, or he's just a complete panicked mess. He's just like falling to pieces. And
Elliot's a complete mess. When we start, he goes to his psychiatrist, and he can't even function. He can't function. It's so bad that Mr. Robot takes control completely.
Yeah, not even to stop him from saying things, but just because he's such a mess.
Yeah, just because he's such a mess. Exactly.
And instead of like fighting against Elliot now, Mr. Robot just basically lays it all out on the table for his therapist.
Yeah.
Basically says, you need to know what's going on here, honey. 5'9", that was me. I caused that thing. And this whole, build all these buildings to collapse. This is some assholes that are using my plan against me.
Yeah.
And against the world, for their own agenda. And I'm pissed off. And he's basically letting this.
Mr. Robot finally sees that he's been played.
Yeah. And he's angry.
Like
Elliot's now like panicked and Mr. Robot is pissed.
Yep, exactly.
The good thing here is that for once, it seems like Mr. Robot and Elliot are going to be on the same side.
Yeah, for once.
Now.
Yeah.
Elliot because he wants to stop people, and Mr. Robot because he's pissed off and basically wants revenge on these people.
Right, exactly.
The Dark Army. Which is kind of interesting because when the season was about to start, the showrunner for the series had said that this season was about taking agency and taking control. But through the whole season so far, all the way up even into this episode, it's all been about losing control, really. It's been about Elliot not being in any control, not having agency, and having everything he does basically be used against him or be like just kind of maneuvered around completely without trouble.
Mr. Robot, Elliot, Mr. Robot, not having any agency of their own. Like this whole time, Mr. Robot thought he had agency with what he was doing, but he was being manipulated like everybody else.
And Elliot was trying desperately to have his own agency and to try to stop Mr. Robot, but in doing so ended up, causing disasters far worse than what he had originally intended.
Right.
So now Elliot is like panicked. Mr. Robot's looking for answers and for retribution. Hopefully this means that the rest of the season sees them joining forces to take back actual agency.
Right.
That's the kind of turn I'm looking for right now.
That's the kind of turn I'm looking for. And again, why I said I had mixed feelings about this episode was because it's so dire. Everything seems hopeless now, right? Because it's like you see how powerful White Rose is.
Yeah.
And how she's just completely won.
Yeah, and Irving kind of illustrates this by taking Mr. Robot for a ride and shows him, he says, 71 buildings fell down, thousands of people died. Look at the people on that rooftop.
Right.
Do they look like they even care? And he's all, now I'm going to go in there and clean up, like remove a dead body that one of those people has like left in the room so that they don't have to worry about it.
Right.
It's like, this is how powerful these people are. It doesn't matter what you do. They'll just walk away from it.
Yeah.
And that's a very dire, like you said, a dire thing to think about for the kind of story of this. Like there is no agency. The Mr. Robot was all about like fighting the system, fighting the power, And this is basically saying you can't.
Yeah.
In this episode.
Yeah. This episode was basically a rebuke of that. Like it basically lays out that 5'9" was not orchestrated by Mr. Robot. That was not his plan. 5'9" was a distraction, to help further the ends of White Rose. They even talk about there's the scene with White Rose talking to the head of E Corp.
Still at the Mar-a-Lago.
Still at the Mar-a-Lago. Who is supposed to be working for White Rose anyway, and he openly discussed he knew about 5'9" he knew about 5'9" in advance, the head of E Corp, and he knew it was part of the plan. So it's like, was Mr. Robot sticking it to the man? Hell no. No, he wasn't. He was following a script written by somebody else. Somebody way over his head.
And then even in that, we see even somebody as powerful as the head of E Corp is disenfranchised in the same way now at his own helplessness by what White Rose has orchestrated. And he's like, I did everything you wanted. You got everything you wanted out of this deal. Everything was done. What was the point of this?
And she just replies to him with, I had to ask you twice.
Yeah, which is just brutal.
Just brutal. It's like, damn, burn. Oh, shit.
So the president of E Corp is basically like now making a scene in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, he's making a scene in Mar-a-Lago.
Pissed off.
And we realize there was no real rivalry there either, because the whole time he was working for White Rose the whole time. He was supposed to be doing what she wanted him to do.
He was placed in his position by her. Everything was on her whim. And she even took on manipulating Angela because he wasn't doing it fast enough, or he wasn't doing what he needed to do.
Right, he wasn't doing what he needed to do to manipulate Angela. So again, even there, we see Angela's own agency is undermined. Her idea of getting a job at E-Corp, getting on Philip Price's good side, gaining his influence,
All for naught. It was all part of the plan.
That was all part of the plan. Again.
Yeah. And speaking of Angela, let's talk a little bit about time travel.
She is completely gone. She is.
This is what we kind of were anticipating. And who knows, there still could be some time travel thing, but I don't think so. I think this was the reveal.
So. This was the reveal.
That the time travel thing is not a real theory. That this is not a real thing that they were ever going to explore.
That wasn't a real thing they were going to explore. Any ideas about time travel Angela got? It was likely more manipulation.
And we get to see that in a real tragic way in this, with Darlene and Angela watching the news footage of these buildings collapsing and stuff, and Angela saying, no, everyone's fine. They're already fine. Look, here, I'll do it right now. And she hits rewind on the DVR and then hits pause when the building's like back together.
Right.
And says, see, everybody's fine now. And Darlene's just looking at her like, oh, shit.
And then that,
wow.
that scene was just heartbreaking. That was like, damn.
Yeah, because you see like how manipulated she was. I think the intention a lot was to manipulate some of the fans, which worked.
Yeah, which worked. Again, of course. This show loves manipulating the viewer as well,
Oh yeah, like last season with the jail reveal.
Yes.
This is a show that basically defines the idea of an unreliable narrator. And it goes beyond that. It dives deep into what's called audience contempt, which is the idea of like playing with your audience like they're your little toy, and in order to like fuck with their emotions and get things rolling in that way. So as I'm watching fans like freaking out about like time travel theories and stuff, all I'm thinking is like, God, I don't think this is going to be time travel. I'd be fine if it is, just because I trust the showrunner Sam Esmail, but I knew it wasn't going to be the case. Like, I'm like, this is a case of like real deep and tragic manipulation on the part of Angela.
Here's the deal. This is a show. This is what I'm taking away now. This is a show about manipulation. Everybody's getting manipulated, and everybody in the show is getting manipulated, and you, the viewer, are not spared from that manipulation yourself. So,
yes.
Yeah.
We are a pawn in it as well. It has been made clear clear since episode 1 of the series, from the very first line of the entire series, that we are a character in the story.
Right.
When Elliot speaks directly to us and says, "Hello, friend."
Yeah, hello, friend. Exactly. We are a character in the story as well.
So we are just as much a pawn in the machinations of this plot as is Angela, as is Elliot.
Exactly.
So, I mean, in that sense, as dire as this episode is, this is what I love about the show too. You know?
This is what I love about the show. This is why this show is so brilliant. This is why they're killing it this season. Like I said, I had mixed feelings just because this episode was completely depressing. This episode, I don't think any single hour of television has left me feeling so defeated. It's like I walked away from this doing, what the fuck could Elliot or Mr. Robot possibly do at this point? What could anybody possibly do?
So you said some key words there. You said killing it,
yes,
and depressing. Let's go into that, because we got 2 characters killed in this episode as well. Another really depressing scene. I love the way they did the scene too, which is that through this whole episode, I mean, they're constantly cutting back to them as if there's going to be some kind of bigger part of the plan that we're not seeing yet. We see at the beginning of the episode that the Mr. TV fan has murdered George's, as I'll call him now, roommate, and is basically holding them hostage in the most terrifying way possible, which is that he's just being nice, friendly, and conversational with them as they're sitting staring at a dead body on the floor.
Right, and with him holding the knife.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, this is picking up the thread from the very end of season 2.
Yes.
We saw them at the end of season 2.
Which was basically the post-credit scene.
Which was the post-credit scene, where he approached them.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're like halfway through the season, and and I think it was just last week I was wondering if they were going to go back to that, or if that was even going to be touched upon. And so Sam Esmail did not forget about this plot thread.
If anything in the series ever makes anybody in the audience, and I'm saying this including us or anybody else, feel like, oh, why did they drop that plot point? Just think back into everything that happened in the season, all those kind of unanswered questions from season 2 and how they went back and purposely addressed like every single one of them.
Yes.
If you ever feel like there's something that they glossed over, just assume that it's coming. And it might be another 10 episodes before you find out, but it's coming, And that was the case here, obviously, with George and Elaine. So they're terrorized by this guy. They're in a car with him as he takes them out to the desert to bury the body of the guy he had killed, thinking the whole time that they might be next, that they might be getting killed.
Right.
They make an attempt to escape that was like hilariously bad.
Oh my god. I would
Apparently Elaine can't drive.
Yeah. Too bad. If she could, they probably still be alive.
But it was funny watching Mr. TV fan laughing, or not laughing, just his dry reaction to them trying to take off.
Well, he's like, "Oh man, you gonna do that to a nice car like that?"
Yeah, so that's no way to treat a caddy.
Yeah, treat a caddy.
And then even after that, he's still being really nice and calm to them. And he takes off, and you see there's other agents of the Dark Army at their apartment now, setting up stuff, moving stuff around. So it's like, okay, there's some part of the plan. And he's like, well, now I gotta leave you guys. I really hope they take good care of you, because I really like you too.
Yeah.
He's all, see ya. And he takes off. And we see White Rose's like assistant that we've been seeing throughout this season. The one who's been kind of like skeptical about Elliot and Welleck this whole time.
Right.
And he's kind of like making this case to them. They're thinking at this point, maybe they're recruiting us.
Yeah.
As they're in a room together, though, once they get past
they're recruiting
the apartment,
right.
It starts to become painfully obvious to us, the audience, not to them, because we have more information than they do, exactly what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
We start seeing like, oh, okay, they're setting things up here. They did that thing about trying to make it look like it was a terrorist organization from Iran. Like they have...
they had the scene earlier with the F Society video promising a major terrorist terrorist attack.
Yeah.
After the buildings blew up, like promising another follow-up attack.
And you're like, okay, so these guys are clearly the patsies now.
Yep, they're the patsies. She notices like there's malware for taking over airlines, air traffic control and crashing airplanes. And then she notices that the malware has already been written.
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize that they set up a terrorist attack, and they're gonna have you two be the patsies for it.
And it's cold the way that White Rose's assistant is like talking about sacrifice and how sacrifice for the cause is like the greatest honor. And as he's like having the Dark Army members put a gun in George's hand and forcing his hand up to his own head, and he's screaming and crying, it's horrific watching as this happening. But I love the way they did this, because they didn't show them kill them. Then they cut away from them, and you see that Wellick has now given them information, and then you see like a group of soldiers like storming the apartment, getting in there, and what's happened the second those soldiers are in there.
Oh yeah,
we didn't see it, but it just makes it so much more tragic, because there's this part of you that's like hoping like something in the narrative change, like they'll walk in the room and find like that White Rose's assistant's laying dead on the ground or something. And
it's so tense. And
it's like that little bit of hope in the back of your head, like something, some other people intervened and something happened and everything's going to be okay. No. If you had any hopes for George and Elaine, they were thoroughly dashed, because they're both dead on the ground. And that's the tragedy of those characters. We also know now, as we know that Wellick gave the information about these two people to the FBI, two people I don't think he ever met in the series, which makes it very clear what we were asking before, which is how much of Wellick's kind of crazed capture in the last episode was him actually being kind of crazed and messed up, and how much of it was him in fact following through with the plans that he was given.
Well, we find out that Irving did not notify Wellick of what happened to his wife and child.
Agent Santiago,
the FBI, informs him in the coldest.
Yeah, that's just the most mean-spirited way possible.
The most mean-spirited way possible, and basically threatens him, like, if you rat me out, I'm going to make life for your kid a living hell.
Yeah, I'm gonna make him one of the statistics, one of the abused kids in foster care.
Yeah.
So his position isn't even like that he can do this, he'll be able to see his son again. His position is that his son is in foster care. He may or may not face a miserable life because of it, but if he misbehaves, he'll face the most miserable life possible.
Right.
So there's not even a bright side for him. It's not even a matter of like, just do this and, you'll be reunited with your kid and it'll be okay. It's like, no, you're going to be shit for the rest of your life from this point on. It's just crap for you. There is going to be no bright side at all. And your kid's probably going to have shit for a life. But if you want to ensure that your kid doesn't have like ultra mega super shit for the rest of his life, then you better play along. And that's like the tragedy of Wellick now, as Santiago leaves and you just hear Wellick just bawling. He's fallen apart now. He's just completely defeated.
Yeah, he's just completely defeated. And again, it plays into the narrative, like everybody's defeated in this episode in one way or another, except for the people, behind the conspiracy, except for White Rose and the people involved with the Dark Army.
We're left with only a few strands of hope behind now, which is that one, Darlene is still alive.
Yes.
And she's with Angela taking care of her. 2, Elliot's still alive, and Mr. Robot is no longer an antagonist to him.
Right.
And Elliot. 3, Dom is not falling for everything that's happened. In fact, she has come to the conclusion now that White Rose is getting away with all of this.
Right.
And she's not happy about it, but she's also not buying into the narrative.
Yeah, she's also not buying into the narrative.
So these are kind of like the last strands of hope we have. And that's what I think when Sam Esmail said that this season was about agency. I think this is like a turning point for the whole series in a way. Like this is the setup for the next stage of what Mr. Robot is as a series, which is this is now we've clearly established like who the enemy is. It's White Rose. You know,
right.
We've very clearly established that now.
We went from the enemy being E-Corp and like sort of like the nebulous Dark Army to like White Rose is now like the clear enemy.
Yeah. And now we kind of have like our group of scattered freedom fighters, basically.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I feel like the show is going to be moving forward from this point is like, I think it might be bringing these people together. I think it might be reuniting Elliot with Wellick, reuniting Dom with Elliot and with Darlene and Angela, and possibly even with other characters like the president of E-Corp even, you know? It's like people that like now you have this kind of scattered group of people that have very strong reasons to hold a grudge against White Rose.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm hoping it's going from here now, is that because there's already at least another season ordered for the show. If it's just carrying on, like, can you imagine if like the rest of this season and the entirety of next season is just them like living their lives completely defeated?
That would be way too depressing to watch.
Yeah. Elliot like having not showered in like a month, sitting on his couch, like watching TV, just looking depressed and like zoned out. That's like the rest of the show.
Mr. Robot just drinking heavily.
He's just like, hello, friend.
Yeah.
I'm still alive, I guess.
Whatever. Yeah. Boy, that'd be the most depressing show of all time.
So since the show's not ending at this point, we have to assume that this is like the turning point.
We have to assume this is a turning point, that White Rose hasn't completely won yet.
He thinks he has, but in doing so, he's painted like a big target on his back for these people, these loose ends that he's left.
Right.
And we'll see where it goes from there. But, you know, as dire as this episode was, at the same time, it left me really psyched at the end because I know that this is a turning point, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I really like the idea of Elliot and Mr. Robot working together.
Oh, I love that idea.
And I think I've mentioned it before, but like, if I was to say what my like favorite thing in any TV show or movie or work of fiction is, I can sum it up in one word. It's comeuppance.
Yes.
I love when you have somebody in this position where they feel like they've won and they've manipulated and they've hurt and everything, and they look like they're unstoppable and unconquerable. And that moment when that turns for them is like my favorite thing in any fiction, you know?
Yes.
I love comeuppance so much. So I'm really hoping that that's kind of the direction this is taking, and I feel like it is. So like you said, I walked out of this episode depressed and excited at the same time.
Yeah. My feelings exactly. I was depressed but excited because I know since that wasn't the last episode of the series that the worm is going to turn.
Yeah.
And no matter how things go down, some exciting shit is going to happen.
Unless Sam Esmail is literally just going to have every remaining episode be Elliot sitting on a couch depressed.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the end of the podcast. We'll be talking about the next episode of Mr. Robot next week, along with Stranger Things. Until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. So we're recording this episode late because of the holidays, but also because I've been kind of recovering from a traumatic dental surgery. So because of those things and various other things related to that, you know, like the holidays and friends and people out of town and all that kind of stuff, we're getting this late. So Friday is already long since passed. But on Friday, November 24th, 2017, we got the new season of Frontier and Trailer Park Boys on Netflix. Since we're now past Thanksgiving, we're officially in Christmas season. So we have like Christmas shows coming up this week are already starting. So on Tuesday, November 28th, 2017, Drunk History Christmas Special is coming to Comedy Central. We're also going to get a new season of Glitch and Good Morning Call for Netflix. And then on Wednesday, November 29th, 2017, Vikings returns on History, and The Marvelous Miss Maisel on Amazon. I'd mentioned this show when we talked about the pilot season. It's actually a pretty good show. It's just about like a stand-up comedian, like a female stand-up comedian in, I think it's like the 50s or something, or the early 60s.
Yeah, the early 60s, yeah.
The misogynist era. And about her kind of like breaking out in that time. And it's actually a pretty nice show. I think it's actually done by the writer of Gilmore Girls, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
So if you're into that kind of snappy dialogue or something, you're going to kind of get that in the show. So it's a decent show, yeah. Then Thursday, November 30th, 2017, I Came Up With Christmas, a President Show Christmas, airs on Comedy Central. Which is the President Show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's just like a parody of Trump.
Oh, okay. Hence the name.
This is like
Came Up With Christmas. Yeah.
Which is just plays into the kind of comments that Trump would make. But yeah, so if you're kind of depressed about our current state of our world beyond just what you saw in Mr. Robot, and you want to have a little laugh with some Christmas cheer added in, watch that on Comedy Central on Thursday. Then on Friday, December 1st, I mean, it's already December, it's coming up right on along the corner. Easy returns to Netflix. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. returns to ABC. This looks really good this season. It's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in space.
You were telling me about it. Yeah.
But it's not just like some like, oh, okay, so now it's just another sci-fi show. It's like, no, it's Marvel space. So it's like Kree.
Power Rangers in space.
And it's like, you know, there's like, you see Kree in the trailer and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, it's in space, but it's not like, oh, you know, here's, you know, American power in space. No, this is like alien tech and alien forces and resistance fighters.
Are we going to see the Guardians of the Galaxy? Ha!
It kind of has like a little bit of a Guardians tone to it. There's even a character that has a mask that looks a lot like Star-Lord in the trailer.
Right.
We're obviously not going to see the Guardians in this, but
yeah,
you might see some of the kind of smaller characters from the comics of like Guardians of the Galaxy, stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff I'm expecting to see pop up in this, you know? We'll see some smaller cosmic Marvel entities popping up.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, so that's going to be kind of fun. Also coming to Netflix on Friday, December 1st is Dark. Now, Dark is the show, it's a German show. It's a Netflix original from Germany, and it's being called like the German Stranger Things, basically.
Oh, okay.
And if you watch the trailer for it, it looks really spooky, really good. It's not like an 80s nostalgia thing like Stranger Things is.
Oh, okay,
but
right.
It kind of like, if you kind of like don't think of the 80s side of Stranger Things and just kind of think of like the kind of the dark kind of conspiracy kind of stuff and that side of it, you know, and that kind of like adventurous, fantastical elements, but like think of that in a more like adult kind of direction.
Sure.
That's kind of what Dark looks like. So I'm a little excited for that. I'm going to check that one out.
Nice.
But that's it. That's what's coming up in the week ahead. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. Check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, TVEnthusiast.com. And you can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Casts. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So check that out, and you can see some other videos on the YouTube channel as well. If you haven't watched Hannibal yet, watch Hannibal and then watch our reaction episodes for like season 3, Dinner with Hannibal. We did that. We I think we're kind of proud of those. You can check that out and feel like you're watching along with us. You can also do that with some other shows like Game of Thrones and American Gods. So check that out. Until then though, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Bye. Night.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more coverage